Welcome to Beginners Academy. Tonight we have a talk on DMR, Digital Mobile Radio, by a Panama City amateur and who has a very nice YouTube channel, 73 Outdoors. That's Bob Plank, KK4DIV. So take it away, Bob.
All right. Good evening, everybody. This is KK4DIV, and we're going to talk a little bit about, as Greg said, digital mobile radio. It's going to be I think a fairly short presentation, but hopefully some people will get some information out of this. I'm going to talk a little bit first about what is DMR, some of the equipment and radios you can use for DMR, and then we're going to wrap it up by talking about the project I've been working on here in Panama City, our what we call a high-powered hotspot, and in the future we'll be looking to upgrading that into a full repeater. But what is DMR? DMR stands for Digital Mobile Radio, and you know, a lot of us have used digital voice modes such as D-Star and Yaesu System Fusion. It's just another digital mode. There's I used to say it's one of the big three, but now there's others out there, P25 and some others. But what I think the biggest selling point for DMR is it uses TDMA, which is time division multiple access. It allows 2 time slots on the same channel. Allows 2 conversations to be on the same frequency. What happens is you can have, when you're transmitting, your radio will break it up between time slot 1 and time slot 2, and it will alternate on and off real quick, sending those data packets. And then the other time slot will pick up and fill in. When time slot 1 is not broadcasting, time slot 2 will be, and it will alternate back and forth. So really, in a situation where you have a DMR repeater, you can really have 2 separate conversations going on the same repeater at the same time separately, which is a really big selling point, I think, for DMR. And you save some battery. I was listening in on a DMR net the other night, and they were talking about why DMR radios save battery because they're only transmitting half the time versus regular FM analog. Kind of neat there. But DMR was developed in the early 2000s, tiers 1 and 2. And in 2012, tier 3 came out. That's the trunked system that a lot of safety organizations use, governments, larger businesses, things like that. But in the early years, it was really kind of developed for businesses and government. And in 2014, FCC approved it for amateur use. But to get started with DMR, you've got to have a DMR identification number. That used to be done through DMR Mark, but now it's transitioned over to radioid.net. So if you're needing to get a DMR ID number, just go to www.radioid.net, go register there, and you can get a DMR ID number. And that's what will need to be programmed into your radio or your hotspot, both if you're using a hotspot. To access the DMR networks. And the cool thing, you know, like any of the other digital modes that are connected to the internet, it brings users all over the world in these linked systems. And DMR has several different networks to choose from. The biggest one is Brandmeister. And I think one of the oldest ones is DMR Mark. And the newest one, which we have a local talk group on, is the TGIF network, or Thank God It's Friday, is what that stands for, in case you didn't know. Most people do, I think. But it started out as a talk group on Brandmeister, and they had a net every Friday. And the guys that kind of ran the talk group decided they wanted to branch off and start up their own network. and the TGIF network was born. So, but our local talk group, the 850 Florida Panhandle Rag Chew Talk Group, is on the TGIF network. And this is a screenshot of the radioid.net webpage. And up in the upper left corner there, you can see a login and sign up. That's where you'll want to go to get logged in, or if you haven't logged in before, if you need to get a number, click that, fill out the registration. And I can't remember if they get you an ID number immediately. Best I remember when I did it years ago, I had to wait a couple of days to get an ID number, but that was on the old system. This new system, it may be instantaneous. I just don't know. But don't be surprised if you do have to wait, a couple of days to get a DMR ID number. So next, let's talk about equipment. There's lots and lots of radios to choose from when you're looking at DMR. And I think that's another good selling point for DMR, is there is a lot of different brands you can choose from. Unlike Yaesu System Fusion, where you're kind of locked into Yaesu radios, or D-Star, you're really locked into ICOM radios. I think there's like one Kenwood HT, I think, has been discontinued, the THD72. But really, on those two systems, you're locked into either Yaesu or ICOM. With DMR, there's a lot of different brands. Motorola, the Moto Turbo is kind of the old school way of getting into DMR. But there's a lot of other brands out there now. I use these, the Anytone HT is a great HT for getting into DMR. And Celeste, I think you heard you say you you got your radio from Bridgecom. I'm sure you got one of their Anytone radios. And
I did.
That's where I got mine. It's a fantastic radio, and that's a good company to work with. They're really good about helping out if you've got any questions. But Retivus is another one. TYT, BTEC is another brand. That's Bofang is the radio, but I think BTEC imports them into the US and does some modifications on the software and all that. But you can see Islands, H-Terra, Retivus, Alinco, Motorola, tons of different brands you can use for DMR, way more than you can find on System Fusion or D-Star. And the next thing, part of the equipment you might need is a hotspot. There's several different ones to choose from. You can get a Shark RF open spot. The Skybridge is the one that Bridgecom sells. There's a TGIF hotspot, K4DIV, Robert. He's down there in Spring Hill, Florida. He builds these hotspots and sells them. He's the guy that really runs, him and a couple other guys are the ones that got the TGIF network up and running. But he's got his own brand of hotspot. There's Zoom spots you can get. You can get the components and build your own. So there's the possibilities are really endless. And if you like tinkering with that kind of stuff, really building your own hotspot with the components, getting you a Raspberry Pi, getting you the little Pi hat that plugs into it, and getting the software image on there and all that is really the way to go if you like tinkering with a little bit of hardware and software.
Bob, what is the purpose of a hotspot?
Well, the hotspot gets you into the network. Basically, you can use your HT and you can talk locally to other hams. But if you want to get into the DMR network and talk to hams all over the world, you're going to need to get a hotspot for now. A personal hotspot, if you're not in range of a repeater that's connected to the internet, or in range of a high powered hotspot, like I have running at the house right now, personal hotspot traditionally is the way to get in to the DMR networks, whether it be the TGIF network or Brandmeister. But if you're wanting to talk to those hams around the world, that's really what you're needing is to use a hotspot. Does that answer the question there, Greg?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Let's see. So yeah, the hotspots. So next, let's talk about what I've been working on. You can use a high-powered hotspot and repeater. So on the left side of your screen is the piece of equipment I put together. It is a Raspberry Pi 2 and a DVM board. And what you see coming off the front side of that is a DB9 connector that's connected to a radio. So where your hotspots have a low power transceiver built onto the board for personal use around the house, maybe you could reach a block or two away. It's just not really high powered. This will interface into a radio and allows to use this hotspot for miles around. And on the right hand side is one of Bridgecom's repeaters that you could buy if you wanted to go that route. So in Panama City, the DMR, I guess DMR has been kind of lacking for those that haven't had a hotspot, haven't really been able to do much with their DMR radio other than get on the local analog repeaters, because your DMR radios will work on analog as well as the DMR digital. So we've been really limited to these small personal hotspots if you had one in the Panama City area, if you're wanting to talk to people around the world. So I started doing some research. I figured, we were due a repeater or a better solution in the Panama City area. So I researched several sites, and one in particular got me going in the right direction. I have the whole blog post there, but just n5amd.com is his main blog post, and there he has some digital radio how-tos and how to make a MMDVM digital repeater. And that's where I got the wheels started spinning, I guess you could say, to get something going in town. So in his blog, he had a couple different parts and some ideas to use, and one of them was this STM32 DVM board. That's sold by a company called Repeater Builder, and they have a website, repeaterbuilder.com. And what that does, that attaches to the pins. I don't know if many people are familiar with the Raspberry Pi, but it's got some general purpose IO pins, GPIO pins on the top of the Pi. And this board just plugs in right onto the top of that Pi. And then through that serial port, that DB9 port on your hat that goes on top of the Pi, that will go into any radio with a 9600 baud data port on the back. So you can use one radio and have a hotspot, or you can interface it with two radios and have a repeater. So right here, you can kind of see the progress. Upper left corner is the Pi and the board that I got. Bottom left, kind of closer up image of it. And then on the right there, that's what we've got. Is the FT8800 with that Pi and Pi hat DVM board interface to one another. Currently, it is just a simplex. One radio, it's a hotspot. So the problem with a simplex with a hotspot is, with this high-powered hotspot, if you're listening, you're probably only going to hear one side of the conversation. It's not like a repeater. So if the person in town may be talking to someone in California, if the person in town is out of simplex range with you, You're not going to hear the person in town. You're only going to hear the person in California because they're coming through the hotspot that's going to be on a higher antenna and going to have a better range. So that's the downside to the current setup. You may only hear one side of the conversation. In the future, I'm looking to put up a full-blown DMR repeater. Haven't found a suitable site for it yet. There has been some discussion and some ideas where we could put this, but we're still looking for a couple of suitable radios, looking for a suitable site. The site's going to need to have internet for us to take advantage of to get into the TGIF, the networks, and be able to interact with other hams that might not be in the local area, which I think is a big part of DMR. So right now, the hotspot here is a Yaesu FT8800. Like I said, it's running about 20 watts. It's on 146.595 megahertz. The antenna is a Diamond X50, and the base of the antenna is up about 15 feet or so off the ground. So it's not real high, but it's good enough to get a few miles of coverage. I can almost reach it at work, and I think work's about 5 miles away, something like that, 4 or 5 miles away. So it would almost reach work, but won't quite get me there. It is connected to the TGIF network to talk group 850, Florida Panhandle Ragchew. And if you are able to access it, you're free to try it. You change the talk groups. If you want to try a different talk group, 31665 is the TGIF talk group. And that's one you can really hear a lot of traffic on. I'm looking at my personal hotspot here. I see traffic on it right now. So there's always activity on that hotspot, on that talk group, and hams from all over the country connect to that. It's the main talk group of the network. But yeah, with the TGIF network, you can connect to any talk group. There is about 700 or so talk groups. The last time I looked, not all of them are very active, but there are plenty of them out there that you can connect to, different interests. I've seen some for areas, interest. I think there's one talk group that I have programmed in my radio for camping and things like that. I've seen it for people that are bikers, computer enthusiasts, or just general rag chewing. So there's all kinds of interest groups out there on these talk groups. And and I keep saying this, but I think that's another thing about DMR or any of the digital modes. There's so many different rooms or talk groups to connect to that people may have interest in. Let's see here. And that's it. I said it was going to be a short presentation, but I'm not sure if I answered everybody's questions, but I left this last slide in here, so I am free to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Well, Bob, thanks so much. I guess I had a question or an idea. Maybe there could be a local DMR net with the hotspot.
Yep. We could. I've thought about that. We could do it on the 850 talk group and just have a local DMR net one night a week. And yeah, I really have thought about that, especially if we get the repeater up, and we can do it before we get the repeater up, but absolutely, that would be a fantastic idea to get people more involved and get on DMR.
Yep. And Celeste lives in Lynn Haven, so she should be in range there.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep.
Yeah.
And so,
Question.
yeah, go ahead.
Maybe a silly question. Will the DMR radio also operate regular FM? So you're not just putting something in one mode.
Like you talking about like a DMR radio that we have.
Yeah, can you get on a regular FM repeater, 145.21 with it or something?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's just a standard FM radio with DMR.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
just wondered if I had to invest
like
in
this
something that I
anytone
could
I
only
have right-
use.
Yeah,
with
this
a 20-foot
anytone I have
antenna
right
in
here
Panama
next to me. It's got DMR, and I use it to access the 210 repeater regularly also.
Okay,
So they do both. Just like your Fusion radio and the D-Star radio, they have FM and the digital capabilities.
we need both things to make a full one to have a D-Star Fusion,
Yeah.
DMR, and regular FM for $29.95.
Yes, absolutely. If anybody could do it, they could do it.
Yeah.
Well, is there any benefit on the time slots other than the fact that whoever you're wanting to talk to needs to be on the same one? Are they like used for different purposes, time one and time two? Or
Usually, from what I've read on for most repeaters, time slot 2 is reserved for connecting to the network over the internet. Time slot 1 is your local time slot. So people that are using local and just want to talk locally, they'll be on time slot 1.
Yeah.
And it's usually talk group 9 for local.
Yeah.
And then time slot 2 is reserved for connecting to the network, and then whatever talk group you want to get on the network.
so if you're going through a hotspot, does the hotspot need to be on 2?
The
And the
hotspots
radio on
hotspots
1?
are generally default to 2. So
Yeah.
anytime you're going through a hotspot, it's
Uh,
on talk group 2.
Bob, could you drop the share so we could see you?
Oh, absolutely. How do I do that? Stop share. There's the button.
Ah,
All right.
All right.
well, see, I've got a hotspot in place, but I use it predominantly, and props up to George because he's the one that helped get me going on it. I use it predominantly for D-Star,
Mhm.
which means if I want to change a reflector, I got to get in there and I've got the archaic model, of course. Came with the free little handheld that has like 16 channels, and but I don't use the hotspot for that. I use it for D-Star. So, but I have to get into the dashboard and change the one reflector setting that I get, manually each time.
Oh, okay.
And I haven't really looked to see if it can parallel with DMR or whether it's an either or type configuration. I haven't got that deep into it.
Yeah.
Any of the DM, any of the Raspberry Pi ones, the MDM or whatever they're called, you can switch.
MDM,
You could have them both turned on, so you could use it on D-Star and a DMR at the same time.
And Fusion. Yeah.
And Fusion, you can have them all at once. Now, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the ideal situation, because the problem that ends up happening is they won't drop a channel until it goes dead. Let's say there's some traffic on your D-Star, you may never hear anything on DMR. It just won't come through. Because what they'll do is you basically give it a timeout that you put in there, so it'll listen. If you hear something, it can just be stuck there if you happen to be on an active talk group. It'll never switch over. Now, if it does go dead, and then at some point it will then switch over to the next one, listen. If it doesn't hear anything, it'll switch to the next and then back. But my experience, I think you're probably better off having it stuck on one, but you can actually use it on multiple at the same time.
I like the fact that the D-Star seems to be working. I know if I get in there and tinker, I run the risk of screwing it up or launching a missile, one or the other. But it was a real cheap combo. Well, then the other one would become obsolete, and I don't know. George can tell you, he had to spoon feed me through the first one. He probably don't want to do that again. So it was miserable. I know he gets tired of me telling the story, but I copied his instructions verbatim to the point to where it was plotting me as being in his house because I put the. So yeah, I can follow instructions. I just can't.
I had sent screenshots of my settings, and he copied my longitude and latitude as well.
Yeah.
Do
Anybody
that
else
out.
have any other questions or?
So how many people in the area have DMR radios?
Yeah, few of
Okay,
us here.
cool. Now, one of the articles that I read, because they're programmable, they warned that they may not be compatible with each other. Is that not true?
Well, the software between the radios probably isn't compatible with one another. I'm not sure if that's what they're referring to or not, but the digital voice mode itself, they are compatible. You know, you can hear, each other if you got different brands or radios or whatever.
So that's pretty standard. That's
Yes,
there's a known standard that they're all going to. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. The voice encoder, decoder, that changes it from, your voice to a digital, that's all standardized. So you're going to be able to hear one another on that.
Okay.
But the software, yeah, if I've got an Anytone radio and somebody else has a TYT brand DMR radio, yeah, the software to program them are not compatible with one another.
Okay.
Similar, but not.
Similar, yeah. And if you know how to make a code plug on one, you could probably make a code plug on another, but you're going to have to learn some things.
Yeah, and that was one thing I would say about programming DMR radio. I've got two different DMR radios, and they're different on how to program them. But it's also, it feels like a lot of times in there when you're programming your DMR radio, you're doing triple entry on, re-entering the same number, the same frequency, or the same talk group. You're re-entering things a lot. It's frankly, to me, I think they could do probably any of the DMR software could probably be written a little bit cleaner. And if they would look at those dependencies and fill in the numbers, so you make your only input data once. Once you get the club plug written, they run just fine, but it's not very intuitive in my opinion. Doing regular standard FM programming for an FM radio, I mean, you got your frequencies, your offset. It's pretty straightforward. When you get to the DMR stuff, to me, it's not. A lot of it's double entry, and you're going in through, two menus over here, then the third menu down here in this thing, and it's kind of confusing, more confusing than I think it needs to be.
I won't disagree with that.
Yeah, because
I thought
what I'm talking
D-Star
about-
was hard to program until I got into DMR.
yeah, because my radio will talk to the hotspot, but that frequency is totally irrelevant to the frequency that I need to tell the hotspot to look for and translate to, correct? I don't have to
Yeah,
run the same frequency throughout.
Run that by me again.
Okay.
Say what?
Like currently, my radio, the frequency that I'm using to talk to the hotspot, would that have to be the same frequency that I'm wanting the hotspot to go to on the other end? Or do I put that through the dashboard and it's completely different from the one that I'm operating on here at the house?
So I'm still confused.
So am I.
When you
Welcome to my world.
yeah, okay. I think I might see what you're trying to say here. Your frequency on your hotspot is between you and your hotspot on your HT
Right.
and your hotspot. It goes through that.
Right.
Once it goes out to the network and it goes to another hotspot, it will come out whatever frequency their hotspot is set on. You don't need to change anything. Does that answer your question?
Oh, that's cool.
So let's say bots, you could, if you were on DMR, whatever frequency your hotspot is on, you could go in to the talk group 850, which is the Florida Panhandle Rag Chew talk group. It would go out to every hotspot that is connected to the 850 talk group at that time. Whatever frequency their hotspot is set on is what frequency it comes out on.
Okay.
So
So the only time I need to worry about frequency when I'm out and about would be if I was wanting to access like your hotspot on a specific.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So
all right.
yeah, you just would have your hotspot frequency programmed into your radio. Now, when we get a repeater set up and you want to access the repeater, the DMR repeater, you would need to program that frequency in as well.
But then that wouldn't necessarily go through my hotspot.
If
I'd
you're
be getting that direct, right?
Yeah, you would be going to the repeater direct. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It's making a little more sense to me now. I'm not
Okay.
ready to launch missiles yet, but I'm getting some clarity.
Well, Jimmy, you might want to consider some of this with the difficulty you have getting antennas going from your location.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, that's a big, a lot of people have really said that that's how they're getting their radio fix, I guess you could say. So many people are living in apartments or restricted HOAs where they can't put up antennas and get on HF. But with DMR or any of those digital modes where you're getting connected to the internet and then it goes out and you could talk to anybody anywhere. So you don't have to have those antennas and all of that. Now to me, it's never going to replace HF. You know, I love HF radio, but it's another fun, aspect of the hobby, the digital voice modes.
Cool. Any other questions for Bob? Well, Bob, I really appreciate you giving this talk for Beginners Academy.
Oh, my
And
pleasure.
It turns out to be very timely for Celeste. And
Yes, thank you. I know where to find you if I have questions.
That's right. You know where to find me. You can reach out via email, bobplank74@gmail. I think I'm good on QRZ, so you can get my email off of there. And ask me any questions. I don't know all the answers, but I will certainly try my best to get you pointed in the right direction.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.